So good evening to everybody. I'm Stefania Petrosillo, working for EUROPARC Federation as a policy officer here in Brussels. I am in charge of several topics, among them sustainable agriculture. And today I would like to start the webinar sharing with you some key points to start our conversation today. The first one is about protected areas. When we speak about protected areas, we have to keep in mind that we are speaking about the national parks, but also regional parks, nature and biosphere reserves, marine and landscape protected areas, Natura 2000 sites, etc. That means that we have several kinds of natural protected areas with different kinds of problems, with different kind of dimensions, etc. All of them work, of course, to protect Europe's unique variety of wildlife habitats and escapes. Other point, today we are speaking about green economy. We all agree that economic growth depends on natural resources that are not unlimited. So it's not a choice between environment protection and economic prosperity, because they are strictly interconnected. That means for us to work with farmers and protected areas managers, work together, developing policies, methodologies, economic instruments, and innovative practices for sustainable production and sustainable consumption. Another very important point is about diversity. Protected areas have to deal with different kinds of agriculture and farmers. We can have small traditional farmers in some protected areas, for example in the Alps, but we can have also big enterprises, big farm companies working nearby the protected areas, for example, in the Netherlands, in Germany, etc. So, kind of stakeholders and find a way to work together with different kinds of farmers. Another very important point for us is that for protected areas, agriculture is not only about food production. For us, is about biodiversity, water, soil, climate, landscape, but also about culture, history, memory, traditions, taste, identity. And of course, it's very connected with health, well-being, and much more ecosystem services. So protected areas and farmers can build good partnership. Public and people generally know about conflicts. Of course, there are conflicts. There are very difficult situations between farmers and protected areas managers, but there are also many good examples of collaborations. And what we would like to do as EUROPARC is really to support the parks who are working well with farmers, and to invite all the protected areas and other farmers to work together. Of course, a partnership does not mean to agree always on everything. This is clear. So the key point is how to build trust, how to try to find a way to work together. And something that is very nice, a message that I heard recently from the Slow Food president was about the smiling. And I think it's very important because for both sides, farmers and protected areas, it's very important to build a positive interaction. And remember all the time that all of us are speaking and acting to improve the quality of life for us, our children, and the planet. So really our interests are the same. What EUROPARC does for sustainable agriculture? For EUROPARC, this is one of our priorities. So we have an internal commission on agriculture and protected areas. We organize a lot of trainings for our members. For example, this year, the SIGA seminar was devoted to sustainable agriculture in and around protected areas. We are collecting a lot of case studies about the same topic. And last year, we organized the European Day of Parks, devoted to a taste of nature. And this year, we published a recipe book coming out from this experience. And this initiative is in collaboration with Slow Food International. And of course, we have the webinar of today, and we are organizing many other activities on it. We work a lot with other organizations. We have an important memorandum of understanding with Slow Food International, and this webinar also is organized with them. We collaborate with other NGOs and farmer associations. We are member of several platforms here in Brussels acting in agriculture. And of course, finally, but not least, lobby, advocacy, and collaboration with the European institutions, that means European Commission, European Parliament, Committee of Region, Council of Europe. Just very small information about what's happening here in Brussels about the debate of common agriculture policies after 2020. It's a big debate, so it's not of today. So I just want to share with you some general information. The Commission is working on a simplification and modernization of the CAP. This year, we had a public consultation and an impact assessment. The results have been already published. The Committee of Region adopted a position paper of future CAP. We have a lot of debates at the European and national level about the future of CAP. And possibly next year we will have the first legislative proposal. But at the same time, there are a lot of other things that will happen. There is the big debate on the future of the European Union, and there are also not very small things that are happening. The Brexit, a lot of national elections, the budget of European Union, and the elections that we will have in 2019, when we will have a new parliament and a new commission. Now, this is for the general introduction of the topic. And now I would like to invite our case study to take the floor, the microphone. As I told you, this webinar about agriculture is organized with Slow Food, and the first case study that we will share with you is presented by Paolo Bozzacchini and Alessandro Cecchini from Slow Food, in collaboration with Maria Pia Sparla from the Parco Agricolo Sud Milano. It's about a project that Slow Food, the park, and some universities are implemented to promote a different way to work with farmers. But they will tell us more about it. Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Alessandro, can you hear us? Now we cannot hear you, Alessandro.
Hello, hello.
Yes, you're back.
You hear the first slide? May I go on?
Yeah, no, you should repeat the first slide, and we are hearing you a bit far away.
As I told you, I am Alessandro Cecchini, and today with my colleague Paolo Bolzacchini, we're going to present you the project Feeding Milan Energy for Change that has been promoted by Slow Food from 2009 to 2014. The context that we have been working on is the Milan South Agricultural Regional Park. From go on, we're going to call it with its real Italian name, it is Parco Agricolo Sud Milano. That's an area of 47,000 hectares with 61 municipalities, including the city of Milan. Here you can see the map. The Parco Agricolo Sud is one of the most representative agricultural park in Europe, which is mostly ignored by the city inhabitants. It's rich of local resources, talking about nature, agriculture, historical and cultural heritage, and landscape. The Parco Agricolo Sud was once mainly focused on agro-industrial production, which was not aimed for the city provision. In recent years, also following the loss of profitability of this kind of agriculture, production has shifted from the midstream food supply chain that we call the long supply chain to the so-called short and local supply chain, which emphasizes the relationship between producer and consumers and the role of this relationship in constructing value and meaning rather than solely the type of product itself. Here you can see some photos of the Parco Agricolo Sud, historical monuments, water channels, and some photo of agriculture, traditional and industrial. Okay, let's move on. So, Nutrire Milano was a territorial project started in 2009, as I told you before, promoted by Slow Food Italia, Politecnico di Milano, and the University of Gastronomic Sciences in the framework of Expo 2015, which main theme was Feeding the Planet Energy for Life. The project was funded mainly by Fondazione Cariplo, that is a private foundation, the Milan municipality, and the Parco Agricolo Sud Milano itself. So the partners were Slow Food, that is an international association established in 1989, which is a cultural movement that proposes a philosophy of pleasure and educational program for taste, for gastronomic heritage protection, and for consumer training. Politecnico di Milano with its design school, and University of Gastronomic Science, that is an international research and educational center for sustainable agriculture and gastronomy. So, Nutrire Milano started from the observation of a matter of fact. In the urban area of Milan, the demand of high quality and fresh food hugely exceeded the available production, despite the presence of a wide potential supply, the Parco Agricolo Sud Milano itself. In such a context, a new paradigm of agriculture should have become the main tool to help this demand meet supply. This meant to revitalize local networks, encourage the sharing of common principles, and optimize the resources in order to create a new territorial system. So the aim of the project was to support, spread, and create a synergetic network of services for a short chain between the city and its surrounding agricultural areas. In such a framework, on one side, the scenario figures out the possibility way to shorten up the food chain, the so-called demediation, in order to put producers and consumers in a direct relationship. And on the other side, the multifunctionality. The concept of multifunctionality in agriculture ascribed to the opportunity to diversify the farm sources of income by supplying jointly to its primary function of producing food other non-commodity outputs, contributing to the socio-economic viability of many rural areas. So our vision was a rural urban area where filling the city and at the same time offering city dwellers a number of opportunity for a multiplicity of farming and nature-related activities with two main goals. The first one was to promote a shift from industrial agriculture to sustainable multifunctional farming, thanks to the support of existing best practices and the development of new specifically conceived projects. Second, to promote new culture of food and agriculture and to raise awareness among citizens of the Parco Agricolo Sud Milano relevance for the quality of life in Milan. So we put in place these strategies. First one, to transform the proximity to the city from a disadvantage to an advantage, promoting the scenario of 0 miles food and tourism. Second, to support existing best practices and to make their activities more visible in order to extend them to other farms and citizens. Third, to build new food networks based on two main concepts of demediation, to shorten up the agri-food chain, and multifunctionality. So here you can see the project steps that we divided in three main actions. The first one was the territorial mapping, the second one the Milan Earth Market, and the third one short and local supply chain projects. So the first step has been dedicated to carry out a territorial analysis with the aim of mapping all those farms which were already practicing multifunctionality and the short chain. The goal of this action was to share the vision of Nutrire Milano and to gather information and data in order to involve them into the next steps of the project. And the second action we focused on was the implementation of the Milan Earth Market. Earth markets are farmers' markets that have been established according to the guidelines that follow the slow food philosophy. All products must meet specific quality criteria reflecting the slow food principle of good, clean, and fair. Good means fresh and seasonable, healthy, tasty food, and able to stimulate and satisfy the senses. Clean refers to environmentally sustainable cultivation and production processes. Fair to accessible prices for consumer and fair compensation and condition to consumers. So, Mercato della Terra of Milano started in December 2009 and it's still going. It takes place twice a month in a public location named Fabbrica del Vapore, which is next to Milan city center. There are more than 90 producers involved, mainly coming from Parco Agricolo Sud Milano, but also they come from the area surrounding the city within 40 kilometers from the city center. Right now, as a result, we can say that as the project fundings ended in 2014, the Milan Earth Market gained financial and management autonomy, and today is completely self-sufficient. And the third step, our action focused on specific products and their relative supply chains. First of all, we designed a food chain project which involved some farmer of Parco Agricolo Sud Milano to start cereals production aimed to be transformed in high quality bakery products. Ancient and new varieties were sowed and small local mills have been involved. Today in Milan, there are bakeries that uses almost exclusively local flour produced in Parco Agricolo Sud. Some of them do participate to Slow Food Milan Earth Market, and many farmers have shifted to cereal production, and some of them have even started to produce bread themselves. Then Then we focused on meat and dairy supply chain through the implementation of a slow food presidium on the Varese cattle. The cattle was at risk of extinction. We involved some farmers that were already breeding them. Nowadays, there are a lot more farmers breeding this kind of cattle. And the number of the cattle itself raised from 15 in 2009 to some hundreds in 2016. Then we focused on the vegetable and fruit supply chain. At the beginning of the project, in 2009, the area surrounding Milan, there was a lack of vegetables and fruit production. Starting from the high request of fresh food products, we started some services in order to stimulate the farmers to switch on vegetable production. The aim of this project was to bring fresh veggies to the urban population, boosting the mediation ways of selling it, both in the city and in farms. As a result, today we can say there is a good supply of fresh food directly brought to Milan from Parco Agricolo Sud Milano. This supply is directed to final consumers through the farmers market, even Mercato della Terra, but also other farmers market, restaurants, small neighborhood shops, and other kinds of delivery services that have been developed by different actors in the last 7 years. So what we have accomplished, we can say that the project helped to revitalize a direct linkage with Parco Agricolo Sud Milano food production and the Milan urban area consumption. It helped to raise the seating awareness of the relevance of Parco Agricolo Sud itself, and helped to design new tools in order to help Parco Agricolo Sud farms to reach economic sustainability. Right now, we do not have analytics data in order to evaluate the effectiveness of our intervention. But there is an ongoing research from Parco Agricolo Sud Milano and Milan University of Agricultural Science that will measure the improving of the economics parameter of the farms involved in the project. Okay, I hope that being clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alessandro and Paolo. I think that what we stress from your presentation that was very, very interesting is to see how the collaboration between different kind of actors, university, parks, farmers, and consumers can be very important to reach objectives that are common objectives, in fact, as I would like to stress again in this webinar. And your project really showed how it's possible to improve the benefits from farmers working in collaboration with the park. And now we will have the other case study, this time from Catalonia, from Spain. And the perspective will be the same, but for another side. We will see how the collaboration with farmers can be important and can create benefit for biodiversity and natural conservation. So we will listen now Sean Cahill, and in collaboration with Joano Villamou from the Serra de Colserola Natural Park. Thank you very much. Sure, up to you.
Good afternoon. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, Chen, we can hear you well.
Okay. As Stefania said, I'm going to be speaking this afternoon, presenting this work from Colcerola, Serra de Colcerola Natural Park. I'm a biologist here at the park, and Juan is the main technician. He's an agronomist who is working on this project here. So the title is Promoting Open Spaces with Farmers in a Forest Park as a Means to Increase Biodiversity. So in Colcerola it's a large, mostly forested park. It's a Natura 2000 site, and it's in the middle basically of the Barcelona metropolitan area, surrounded by 9 municipalities, the largest of which is Barcelona city itself. And the area has over 4 million inhabitants, and the park itself would receive an estimated 3 million visitors each year. So as I say, most of the park is Mediterranean forest and woodland. Approximately 70% of the park is Mediterranean pine and oak woodlands. And agriculture is basically located on the periphery of this park. Most of the interior, as you can see here, is basically large extensions of continuous forest. Now, this area has undergone very intense changes in recent decades, but historically the landscape was very different. In the 19th century, for example, many of the hills in Colcerola were covered with terrace vineyards for producing wine and so on, and also. And it was heavily exploited for agricultural uses and also for forestry. However, with the arrival of the phylloxera epidemic, many of these vineyards disappeared. They were abandoned. And also during the last 50 years, many farmers have abandoned the agricultural activity, which was traditional here. You can see, for example, some old photographs from the park from almost a century ago, how the landscape was a lot more open and much less forested. And over time, with the abandoning of different agricultural activities here, and also grazing with livestock, many of these areas have transitioned then gradually to forest. In some cases also, areas were replanted, which has meant that nowadays our landscape has basically become dominated by woodlands. Now this has two important implications for this park. On the one hand, it has meant that we've lost many of these open habitats, which were very important for biodiversity, and on the other hand, it also signifies an increased risk of forest fires, and this is an important factor, considering that we're very close to large urban areas. As I said, from the beginning of the creation of the Serra de Colcerola Natural Park, it was clear the original specific plan for the protection and conservation of the park recognized the importance of these open habitats and agricultural areas for their interest regarding biodiversity within this forest matrix. And over the last 3 decades since the creation of the park, many studies have reaffirmed this fact, and we're very aware of the need to maintain these kind of habitats and open spaces to conserve this biodiversity. As such, agricultural activity is necessary to keep, to preserve and conserve these kind of open, non-forested habitats. But there are many challenges for the continuance of agriculture in the park. For example, the terrain itself is quite difficult to work. Increasingly, it's more arid with climate change also, and there's water scarcity can be a major hindrance to continuing cultivation of certain crops. Also, a lot of the agricultural land which is still remaining is now in the hands of developers. It's either planned for public amenity or housing, and at some future time it could be transformed. So there are landowners who have little interest in actually farming the land themselves. The number of farmers has decreased, so we have kind of lost the farmer society which traditionally existed here. and also other aspects such as the abundance of wild boar in the area. These can be other factors that can make it difficult to keep activity economically viable. And also the difficulties that the park authorities have themselves for intervening in maintaining agriculture in a direct way. Now, since the park was created, over the years, the park authorities themselves have been involved in many direct activities to maintain agricultural activity. But this, as I said, has its limitations, and eventually one reaches a situation where either you make agriculture itself sustainable from both an environmental and economic point of view, or your capacity to intervene is going to be very restricted. In other words, we need to recover agriculture as a viable economic alternative to maintain these habitats in the area. So starting from this point, our kind of low point from agricultural reduction in the area was down to approximately 5% of the surface area of the park, and the goal is to consolidate these remaining areas and to increase the surface area which is being cultivated, and to arrive to at least 500 hectares of active agricultural land within the park. Apart from those cultivated areas, then we also have other types of habitats, basically kind of Mediterranean grasslands, natural grasslands, where grazing would be required to maintain those formations and stop them transition to woodland also. So basically a plan was drawn up to try and achieve these goals with several, basically 8 main lines of action. The first one, and the most important basically, is to consolidate the existing cultivated areas and avoid further abandonment of agricultural land. And also being within a Natura 2000 site and a protected area where conservation and biodiversity is of utmost importance, then obviously to try and transition towards organic farming and environmentally friendly agriculture. Also in some areas, marginal private allotments were in a very disordered nature, and these also need to be made more compatible with the park and conservation here also. As I said, the introduction and promotion of grazing to maintain these natural grassland areas and other woodland formations. Also, an important action here is to provide necessary support for these livestock farms with regard to the correct maintenance of animals and so on in the farms. To also provide a network for the marketing and commercialization of the farm products, so that they have an economic output and can arrive to local markets here. Part of this also, from a conservation point of view, the recovery of traditional varieties and local breeds. And also another point which is also quite relevant here is an inventory of traditional dry stone huts, shepherding trails, and other kind of historical patrimony related to farming to conserve the legacy of the tradition here. As I said, the most important aspect here is consolidating the cultivated areas and avoiding further abandonment. An important part of this, as was commented before, is making available abandoned land or unused land, making it available to farmers who are interested in maintaining their activity. So sometimes the goal here is gaining the trust of landowners so that they can place their land in the hands of people who are willing to actually farm. Now, in recent years, an important part of moving forward on this agricultural plan has been an initiative of dynamization of local organic farming at the park. Now, this is based on the principle of it being a strategy for local development, which is aimed at promoting fairer and more sustainable communities and food production systems, in which farmers are the main protagonists, given that agriculture plays a key role in conserving biodiversity, landscape and ecosystem services of protected natural areas. So this is the basic premise of this initiative and its workings. Now the work here is carried out simultaneously at different levels, both in the farm, local community, and society in general, as well as various dimensions, for example, ecological, cultural, and socioeconomic, as well as political. Okay, so this initiative, it's a participative method which connects the interest in agriculture and stimulates cooperation between the various parties involved. Formally, it's made up of several different bodies: a coordinating group, which is a team made up of technicians, farmers, researchers, and so on; a monitoring group, which basically follows up the different activities of the initiative; and then specific working groups develop lines of action for various aspects in more detailed fashion. For example, the wild boar conflicts that I commented on earlier. On the other side, apart from cultivation, land cultivation, as I said, the maintenance of open spaces here also requires grazing of certain types of habitats with the dual function. On the one hand, as a fire prevention method, it's an essential part of the fire prevention strategy in this forested park, and also for maintaining these habitats in a non-forested fashion, especially these important grassland areas, natural grassland areas, which are extremely interesting for the biodiversity that they contain. There's been quite a lot of work done in the last few years on this particular aspect for the importance it has, I say, from fire prevention and so on. We have an example here of one sector of the park where a sheep farm was created, which can house up to 500 head of sheep and goats. And this flock works basically the peripheral area of the park, maintaining these hyperrhenia grasslands, as I said, but also fire protection strips in and around the forest area, and also some reforested areas. And these thus maintain them free of understory vegetation and reducing the risk of fire. And as a byproduct, then we're commercializing the Colcerola lamb from these. And so the importance of marketing of the products, the activity needs to be sustainable economically, so the marketing of the products is extremely important. Juan has done a lot of work, and we're finally able to establish a quality brand for the park with its own logo called the Producta de Colcerola, based on several considerations: the interest in identifying the quality seasonal agricultural products that are produced here, associated with the park and the traditional landscape within it. Now, this logo, this brand covers a variety of products, the meat that's produced on these farms, honey, fruit, vegetables, and so on. These are all, obviously, there's a small farm, so it's only a limited production, which also adds to the value of the products. Also, the fact that we're trying to transition to organic production and so on, and the brand itself identifying with the idea of conservation within the park. And this brand, as I said, should open new windows for moving forward in the marketing and commercialization of these products, for example, such as organic production. Added to this, there's an active network of outlets for the different products, which has been established for direct sales in markets, different activities, open days and so on that are organized to promote the different products in the park. And also an important initiative is trying to involve local restaurants, getting them involved both in production and as consumers of these products locally. Okay, so just to start summarizing some of the main outcomes of the plan up to date. As I said, this process of dynamization of the local organic farming especially has been very relevant for building community, meetings, getting farmers and other agents together, meeting each other, getting to know each other, establishing trust, and encouraging them moving forward. Also the incorporation of different local authorities as promoters of this initiative. As I said, the final approval of the brand for the commercialization of the different products. The livestock interest of using herds and flocks of sheep and goats and so on to both for habitat maintenance and for fire prevention, with this sub-product of Colcerona lamb, which is also proving successful commercially. Another aspect is, as I said, the recovery of traditional varieties. One particular case of success has been the Mando tomato. It's very, very tasty and large tomato, which is now successful and is being grown in several farms. And finally, as I said, the recovery of the historical patrimony, which helps people identify a sense of place with many of these products. From the biodiversity point of view, as a first main conclusion, we can summarize the fact that the active maintenance of this rich, heterogeneous agro-silvo-pastoral mosaic landscape is key to conserving open habitats and associated biodiversity in what would otherwise be basically just a forested national park. These habitats are essential for maintaining and conserving the overall biodiversity in the area. And as I said, it's also an essential part, especially of the grazing activities, an essential aspect of the fire prevention strategy in the park, which is highly important here. With regard to the agricultural aspects, the importance of networking, pooling together resources, activating basically the local agricultural community, which was more or less dying out at one stage. This is highly important here, the activities of this dynamization initiative, which needs to be an ongoing process to encourage farming community to move forward with their own particular projects in each case. It's quite clear it's difficult to compete with conventional farming in our situation. So we need to embrace here the concept of high nature value farming with a view to producing goods with added commercial value for the local markets, restaurants, and so on. The fact that our farmers are caring for the landscape here is also, I think it's highly important that it's recognized as an added value for produce, with the importance here of identifying historically the product with the place. The difficulties that farmers have in this mountainous forested area, as I said, water scarcity. So many of them will have to work with basically dry farming and so on, and probably have to adapt to future situations in this regard. And then other aspects, for example, such as that of wild boar, which require continuous innovation to try and solve these different problems that may arise. With regard to the future, the action plan, the idea is that it's a dynamic action plan with different inputs so that it will evolve over time. A technical diagnosis, actually, I said here it will soon be completed. Actually, John has just told me this diagnosis is actually now complete. Okay, so this will be the basis now for moving forward on the plan. They also envisage a catalogue of farming within Colcerola to give greater visibility to farmers through online material, printed pamphlets, and so on. This catalogue will contain information not just about the products, but also about the farmers themselves, the interest of the products, and the way that they're working for conservation in the area. And finally, looking at other possibilities for strengthening the product, the Colcerola brand, with giving it an even further added value through identifying it with nature conservation values and so on. And finally, obviously, the financial aids that may be available for new projects in the future. This is always going to be a major topic to investigate. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sean. Just for me was also very interesting. For me, important to stress that, as you know, all of you, we know that Europe, in Europe, we have a lot of wilderness areas, wild forests, etc. But we have many, many, many habitats that are really interconnected with human activities, as we saw today. So to protect some habitats, some species, we have to find a way to work with human beings and to promote activities even in our protected areas. And for this, I would like to also to stress the importance of landowners, as Sean remember us, and the role that parks can have in the revitalization of rural areas, and the importance of participatory approach. And about this, I saw one person asking me to say that the Commission of EUROPARC is working to implement a new tool that maybe we will call European Charter for Sustainable Agriculture in Protected Areas. We are working on it. But now is the moment for questions, and Barbara, it's your turn. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much, Stefania. Thank you very much, Shan. I will probably start with you because we have several questions. So we have Tom asking what type of tree is planted now in Colserola?
Actually, when the park was initially formed, there was a certain amount of planting of pine trees here. It would have been either Aleppo pine, Pinus halepensis, or stone pine, Pinus spinea, and so on. But this basically now, over recent years, the last decade or 15 years or so, there are no more plantations of trees in the park itself, because there's just maintenance of original plantations, and now planting of trees would only be limited to very specific situations, for example, restoration of riparian habitats and so on. But there's now no large-scale planting of trees in the park, just because of this problem that we have of natural reforestation, that areas that are abandoned are becoming forestry just through natural process themselves.
Okay. Then regarding the main production of your farmers within the park, what are the main products they produce? I mean, you mentioned the lamb, you also mentioned some varieties of tomato that have been recovered, but what are the other products?
I suppose some of the main products would be, for example, cherries on some of the farms. We have one or two large farms that are producing quite a lot of cherries, and they're also moving to organic farming. Olive oil is possibly one of the largest ones in the last 10 or 15 years. It's been one of the few crops that has been showing itself to be economically viable. So the farmers have been, in some cases, transforming fruit production to olive oil production. Apart from that, then there's we have two wine vineyards that are still active, although these aren't private initiatives. These are basically public backed vineyards, just small scale. And then there would be some areas also of basically that the largest surface area would be cereal production, which is usually wheat and barley.
Okay. Okay. And regarding the production, Richard made a question about who certifies the products as organic. Is it the park doing so, or otherwise, how can the farmers apply to the park brand?
The organic certification would be from the Catalan regional certification authorities. This wouldn't be certified by the park itself. So this would be another brand or another logo that would accompany the specific one from product the Colserola, which is the local brand from the park itself. But organic production would be certified by the Catalan regional authorities.
Okay, but still you'll have a guide or a kind of standards that farmers need to comply in order to get the brand.
Of course, well, grant they wouldn't.
Yeah,
They wouldn't
your
be
brand, the
receiving.
park brand. Mhm.
The brand, yes. What Kins Okay. Joanne says that each product has a specific regulation, depending on if it's, I suppose, if it's oil, if it's fruit, and so on. Each the meat and so on. Each type of product has its own specific regulation, which is outlined by the park.
Okay. Then let's talk a bit about lamb and the role of herbivores in your park. So one of the main outcomes that you said that the lambs would help you is to reduce the fire risks and to manage the landscape. And there are some people asking, well, if you consider to use wild herbivores instead of cattle.
Wild herbivores.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
We actually cattle we don't have. It's just sheep and goats that
Yeah.
are used. We don't have any cattle, and wild herbivores we don't have at the moment. The only large ungulate that we have is the wild boar, as I say. So they're actually they cause a lot of conflicts in different areas, both in agriculture and other aspects. But they're not obviously they're not useful as herbivores. We don't have typical deer as herbivores here as yet. We have had a few roe deer, but they'd be more browsers almost than herbivores. So we don't have. It's not an option at the moment, and reintroducing them probably isn't either. At least in the medium term.
Okay. And
We
another
have
question. Sorry. Go
just
on.
yeah, just to finish. Even if some of these herbivores might be considered a solution for controlling some vegetation, we would I think we would have other issues to account before considering a reintroduction of herbivores here. For example, the fact that we have so many urban areas and roads and so on around, although they might solve some problems as herbivores, they might create other ones, for example, such as road accidents and so on. So for the moment, the option of being able to control the grazing is probably more interesting, and also the fact that you can decide where they will graze and what habitats they will graze in. Whereas once you have a wild population of grazers, then you can't control. They may end up grazing in the wrong habitats and in areas where you don't want them to be grazing.
Sure. And at the same time, you're bringing a socio-economical benefit to the community, right?
Exactly.
To the majority of sales of the Colcerola lamb, where does it go to? Is it like domestic production and domestic consumption in the surroundings of Barcelona, or are you able to export it elsewhere?
No, as far as I know, all of the production is locally consumed. Yes, in the towns directly surrounding the park. I don't think it would even go beyond the towns that are touching the park here itself.
Okay. Okay. Then regarding other animals in the reserve, we have a question regarding large carnivores. Do you have any issue with large carnivores currently?
No, not yet. No, our largest carnivores would be badgers and foxes. So that's not an issue here. And the nearest large carnivores are some wolves which have appeared in the Pyrenees, isolated cases. And for the moment, they're quite far from here, and it's not likely that they will arrive because the park is actually quite isolated from some other natural areas, and because of the very high density of infrastructure, roads and rails that's around it, and built up areas as well. So it's unlikely that we will have any carnivores other than those that are already here.
And what about the wild boar? Do you have problems and are you trying to make any attempt to control its impact?
The wild boar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the wild boar are the population has grown as well over the last 20 or 30 years. It's well now is also present in other parts of Europe. So the population grew basically exponentially, and it's now basically a question of trying to maintain and control the population to stop it increasing further. So that's it's controlled on several sides. On the one hand, there's formal hunting during the autumn and winter using battues. Farmers also, if they have damages to crops, then they can petition for special night waits and so on to get a permit to shoot the wild boar, either themselves or local hunters to do it for them. So these are quite frequent on some of the farms here, that if they have problems, then they would get these permits, and then hunters would come and basically shoot from high seats. But there are also, it's as I said, it's a very large human population and urban population around the park. So not everybody is in favor of hunting. So new methods are being investigated and so on to try and find other ways of maybe controlling the population. But the best way of controlling the population is by reducing access of wild boar to food sources. So these can either be anthropic sources in urban areas and parks, but also on the farms themselves. So more and more farmers will need to protect their crops from wild boars.
Okay. And a final question regarding land ownership. Is there, are you working with, oh, just a second, I lost, okay. Do you use land stewardship tool, Custodia, to make agreements with the stakeholders?
I think this is an initiative that's really just starting to take off now through this dynamization process. I'm just consulting Duan, but I think we're just Joan says they're starting to set up what they call a land bank. So this would be where landowners who aren't working their land put it in a common pool from which other people who are interested in farming then could sign up to work on that land.
Okay. But land would, okay.
So some of these are just starting to operate now at this stage.
Okay, then regarding again forestry, is there any low intensity forestry being performed in the forest covered areas? Sustainable forestry could be maintained and at the same time could be a financial aid. So
yes, it's the kind of forest that we have in the terrain here. There aren't that many areas which makes it a viable economic operation in itself. So what the park basically tries to do here is when a landowner wants to do a technical plan, a forestry plan for his land, maybe to remove trees from a certain area. Basically, the main objective here is being able to do it without losing money because of the costs involved and so on. So especially over the last few years, areas where it was considered necessary to intervene more from a commercial point of view, basically just to improve the forest and so on. But also there's been a bit of a helping hand, if you like, given from the boom, recent boom in biomass use for as a fuel. So most of this has been the main commercial possibility for many of these forest lands or what would you call them? They could, in some cases, they might be public, others they would be private. But basically, this outlet for biomass production for fuel has meant that they can do these kind of operations without losing money. But it's not really very viable. It's not a profit-making business, really. Hello?
Vale, vale. Vale. Sorry, there have been some technical problems. I'm Teresa Pastor from EUROPARC Federation, based in another office. So we're just going to say goodbye to Sean Cahill, and we're going to proceed to continue with questions for the other speaker.
Okay, in the meantime, I was able to connect. Thank you very much, Teresa, for taking over. I'm sorry, as you know, we have EUROPARC office spread all over Europe, and our office in Regensburg just had an internet crisis, but we are back. Okay, sorry for this unpredictable problem. We will now go to some questions to Alessandro. Alessandro, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
Help me to answer.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. So do farmers have time to go to the market every week, or they have some kind of cooperation, some kind of implemented system that helps them bringing their products to the markets even when they are not able to do it so?
No, they do find the time too, because it's too important to them for them to sell, because people won't go directly from the city to their places to the farms. So the problem here is that they have to reach the citizen directly within the city. So as they shift from, as we said before, the long chain to a short chain, this direct linkage is really important. And in order to maintain it, they organize themselves to be able to get to go to the market and sell twice a week. It's too important to them. So yes, it's a burden, but they organize it and they do it.
Okay. The second question was about environmental benefits. Have you found any environmental benefits, or did you look at it when doing the project?
We answer it on the chat. The project aim wasn't to gather this kind of data. So right now we don't have this kind of data. As I said before, the Parco Agricolo Sud itself with the University of Agricultural Sciences figuring out the economic parameters to see if there has been an improvement during these years, but we didn't analyze the environmental data during this period of the project.
Okay. Is there any other question to address to Italy? It would be interesting to boost this linkage with environmental agroecology. Is there any question? We have Pierre Schmelz, for example, and he made a question to Shen, but I guess you can also try to reply. Do you predict any evolution based on the climate change for the landscape? Do you think this will somehow impact the produce in and around Milano?
Can you repeat, please, because the voice was broke?
If you consider, well, let's try to this one. Which challenge do you meet in communicating with the landowners? Well, I guess this is for Shan, Irene. My question was if you predict any impacts on production in and around the Milano region regarding or caused to climate change.
We didn't get the point. I'm sorry. We
No,
predicted some change in what field?
In production in and around the area of the park.
From which point of view?
From Milano.
Quantity, quality.
All that can be impacted by climate change. Do you already notice? Do you think it will be noticeable in the coming years?
But the production has shifted, as we said, from an industrial to a smaller kind of production. So we can see that this change has happened. Right now, we should carry another territorial mapping to see if this big change has been, to register if this big change has happened. But we can say we saw it. We saw it. The things have changed a lot.
Okay. And regarding stakeholders' engagement, which challenges did you find when communicating with the landowners, especially in implementing the project or starting the project?
Yeah, this was one of the main difficulties we faced in the start of the project. So we have to build this trust, and this is not easy at all. I mean, we gain it mostly through the Earth market, because as the project, the first edition of the market had a good success between the citizens. This really helped us to get their trust and to later involve them in the others project. But this is a good point. I mean, the trust is not really easy to obtain.
Okay, yes, in fact, Stefania Petrosillo was exactly making the same question. Can you perhaps give us some tips to all the other participants on how we can build trust with our partners?
Yeah, it's not easy to answer to this. I mean, to build trust, it's a way to build a long-term partnership. So they are directly linked to these aspects. And also I see that in some way the economical success of the project we implemented has helped a lot in this way. So you have to build long-term partnership. You have to build trust. and trust you build through the quality of your intervention. And Earth Market, as I said before, had been carried out in a good way, and this was a good start to build this trust. And through the years, now we can say we have a good long-term partnership with all these farms.
Okay, thank you very much, Alessandro. I will just make a last question to Shan, and then we can finish our webinar. So Shan, back to Barcelona. What is the role that you see the EU playing in the future of your park, and in particular in CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy?
To be honest, from the Common Agricultural Policy here in our park, I don't know really if its effects are going to sort of trickle down really to the kind of farming that we have here. You know, they're such small productions. I'd say very few farmers will actually be depending on kind of EU resources for the future viability of their farms. Perhaps the only case would really be on some of the larger ones producing olive oil, where they might be receiving, say, some form of direct subsidy for the production of olive oil. The rest of them, I wouldn't see quite so much a direct effect, no? Possibly indirectly from if there was some limitation or effect on, for example, the livestock production and so on, because the inherent costs here of producing livestock in this kind of situation are very high. So the margins are already very slim, and anything, for example, new restrictions or requirements that might tip those margins could possibly have negative effects there. But it's not really a situation where you would have, say, large-scale industrial production, at least in the form that we've had in the CAP up to now. If there was to be any benefit, I think it would have to be where a future CAP had a bit of a change around and started somehow providing help just to exactly these kind of environmentally friendly farming, and give them a helping hand in that sense. And that obviously would be a positive move if it went in that direction.
Okay. Just one last question from Maria Silva. Do you think biomass industry will give more sustainability to the private owners on lands that are not cared for?
Is this for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Sean. Sorry.
Yeah. I think it could be in some cases where we have a combination of agricultural land where they're cultivating and some forestry. This may be an option. But as I said, it's not a kind of territory. It's, as I say, it's quite mountainous and difficult to work for machinery. It's not really competitive with kind of commercial biomass production. So it's only really small local scale. And in actual fact, we've had one or two instances of kind of the opposite, where some farmers have actually been kind of compensated for not cutting down forests. In other words, that they're getting a compensation for maintaining it for its biodiversity interests and preserving it as forest rather than cutting it down. As I said, most places where trees have been cut or forest has been cut for biomass, it's the economic benefit is really only sufficient just to cover the costs of intervening. So it's an intervention usually for forest improvement, for example, adapt the forest to fire prevention strategies and so on. It's less of a biomass commercialization initiative per se.
Okay. Thank you very much, Shan. We had a participation from the Netherlands, Katrien. She mentioned that right in the beginning that massive production or intensive production of dairy products and flowers actually decrease biodiversity in and around national parks in the Netherlands. I don't know if you or maybe Alessandro have something that would like to add to this. In the meantime, I can give you some time to think about it. I will ask our participants to please fill in a short form that will appear in your windows shortly. And meanwhile, I can also tell that all presentations will be available, as well as the recording audio of this webinar, as well as information about and the contact details about from all the presenters today. So I will pass you now the form that you can please answer. Meanwhile, I don't know if you would like to comment anything about the situation in Holland, Shan.
Yes, well, it's quite clear that intensive agriculture on a large scale, especially with dealing with wherever you're dealing with, say, monocultures on large areas, then this, for example, especially if it's not ecological, not organic farming, and there's use of pesticides, I think that's been the clear trend throughout Europe. Has been a relation between intensification of agriculture and loss of biodiversity. But our situation here with regard to agriculture is totally different from that. What would be kind of the norm for most agricultural areas in Europe. Here, it's the absence of agriculture which has created a problem for us. That said, it still is necessary where we kind of reintroduce agriculture and maintain agriculture as an activity here. It's just as important here that to try and transition towards organic farming, organic livestock production, to reduce the negative effects of pesticides and so on the environment here. So I think it's the difference of scales really, but at the end of the day, the kind of future, at least from conservation and biodiversity protection, is moving towards less use of pesticides and so on, and diversifying agriculture as well, avoiding monoculture on large scale.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if Italy has something to say, to add. If not, nothing to add. Okay. So I would like to thank you once more for taking part in this webinar. I hope it was as productive for you as it was for us. We really enjoy having your stories here and sharing them with greater audiences. So if you would like to be a presenter, or if you'd like to suggest a topic for our next EUROPARC webinar, please contact us at office@europarc.org. We will be glad to hear from you. And keep tuned with EUROPARC Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter and website channels, because we update information on a regular basis, and especially regarding agriculture. We will have soon work of our Commission on Sustainable Agriculture. Next year, but before next year, next month, we will be here again with a webinar, this time focused on transboundary cooperation. Soon all the information will be sent to your email addresses. I thank you very much and wish you a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.